My name is Amelia, and if you had told me that one quiet winter night would stir my heart in ways I thought were long forgotten, I might have laughed at you. But there I was, sitting by the fire, when my grandson's friend walked into my home, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle, like the way the first snowflake lands on your palm, melting before you can truly hold it. Yet that single moment would become a memory I would replay over and over, wondering how a simple evening could feel so unforgettable. The snow had been falling for hours, thick and steady, muffling the town into silence. The wind howled faintly against the windows, but inside, my little living room glowed warm with the crackle of burning logs. I've always loved the fireplace. Its golden light, its soft hiss of wood surrendering to flame, its way of turning an ordinary evening into something intimate. I didn't know, as I poured myself a cup of tea, that I was preparing not just for warmth, but for a conversation that would awaken pieces of myself I had long buried. The door opened, and in came my grandson, shaking snow from his jacket. Behind him followed his friend. I had seen him once before in passing, but only briefly. Tonight, however, he was here to stay the evening. His name was Daniel. He had kind eyes, the kind that notice things most people overlook, the details in a room, the flicker of emotion across a face. He smiled politely, thanking me for having him, and set his gloves by the hearth to dry. At first, it was nothing out of the ordinary. The boys chatted, shared jokes, and scrolled on their phones. I offered them cocoa, and they laughed about something only the young seemed to understand. But as the night stretched on, my grandson excused himself to rest, his work the next morning demanding sleep. And that was when the room grew still, leaving Daniel and me alone with the fire. He didn't rush to leave. Instead, he settled into the armchair opposite mine, stretching his hands toward the flames. The glow lit his face in amber and shadow, and for a moment, I was struck by how serene he looked, how comfortable he seemed in the silence. "You have a beautiful home," he said softly, his voice almost blending with the crackle of the wood. "It feels safe here." Safe. Such a simple word, and yet it settled into my chest like a gift. I hadn't thought of my home that way in a long time. Not since my husband passed. Not since the laughter of children had grown into the quiet of an empty nest. We spoke of ordinary things at first. The weather, the fireplace, the history of this old house. But slowly, the conversation deepened. He asked me questions no one asks anymore. "What was your dream when you were younger?" he asked. I almost laughed at the question. Dreams. Those belonged to youth, didn't they? But his eyes were earnest, patient, waiting. So I told him. I told him of how I once longed to travel, to write, to see the world beyond these small town borders. I confessed how life had taken a different turn. Family, responsibilities, choices made out of love but also necessity. He didn't interrupt. He didn't pity me. He just listened, as though my words carried weight. The fire flickered, and with each flame, I found myself saying more than I had intended. Memories I thought I'd buried, my first love, the loss of people I had cherished, the quiet loneliness of growing older. He listened with a stillness that felt rare, as though he was honoring every syllable. "You've lived such a rich life," he said finally. "It's beautiful, even the hard parts. I wish people my age could understand that better." I looked at him, surprised. Most young people rush through conversations, eager to get back to their phones, their own concerns. But not him. His words were not rehearsed flattery, they carried sincerity. And in that sincerity, I felt something stir in me, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I felt seen. The hours slipped by unnoticed. The snow piled high outside, but inside we created a world of our own, a world of shared laughter, unexpected confessions, and comfortable silences. At one point, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the firelight dancing across his face. "Amelia," he said, my name on his lips with a gentleness that caught me off guard. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" I froze, uncertain, my heart quickening despite myself. "What do you see?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I see someone who still has a fire inside," he said. "Not just here," he gestured to the fireplace, "but here." His hand hovered near his chest. "Someone who has stories left to tell, love left to give, dreams left to chase." The room seemed to exhale at his words, and I didn't know what to say. For so long, I had seen myself through the lens of age, of roles and duties. But in that moment, reflected in his eyes, I was reminded that I was still a woman, still a soul with depth and light. I didn't fall in love with him, not in the way one does in novels or reckless youth. But I felt something just as powerful. I felt alive. I felt connected. And maybe, just maybe, that is its own kind of love. The night carried on, and eventually, the clock struck past midnight. The house was quiet, save for the soft hiss of the fire. He stood to leave, pulling on his gloves now dry from the heat. "Thank you," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "For the stories, for the company, for letting me see you." His words lingered as much as his presence did. He didn't reach for me, didn't overstep, but as he brushed past, his hand grazed mine ever so slightly. Just a touch, light as air, but enough to send warmth through me that no fire could replicate. After he left, I sat alone by the fire, staring at the embers as they dimmed. But inside me, something new had been lit. A flame of remembrance, of hope, of the quiet knowledge that it is never too late to be seen, to be cherished, even in unexpected ways. And so, here I am, telling you the story. Not because it was scandalous, not because it was forbidden, but because it was real. It reminded me that our hearts do not grow old the way our bodies do. They remain tender, open, longing for connection until the very last beat. Maybe he was just my grandson's friend. Maybe it was only one evening. But sometimes, one evening is enough to change how you see yourself forever. And so I leave you with this question. Have you ever shared a moment so simple, so fleeting, and yet so profound that it lit a fire in you thought had long gone out?